Evening everyone, I'm your German snob and I just saw Django Unchained, the new Tarantino movie. Um, what can I say? I really enjoyed it. You know what? To start off with that, I am a big fan of Tarantino. And excuse me for a moment. Yeah. So as I said, I'm a big fan of Tarantino. He's one of these directors that, in my opinion, like can't do no wrong. Or at least never did any wrong. So I'm just going on the assumption that they can't do no wrong. Or can do no wrong. Whatever. He has a very unique kind of style, a very unique kind of vision that I enjoy very much. And I think that he does share with a few other filmmakers, but you you see, in my opinion, with Quentin Tarantino, there are a few very specific talents, some of which a quite a few directors possess, but not all that many have them in the same combination that Quentin Tarantino has. You know what I'm saying? Like, for example, there are many directors who have like that love for old movies and for referencing older movies and for making like send-offs to these movies, paying homage to them. There are many directors who write good and natural sounding dialogue. There are many directors who have a great sense of humor. There are many directors who are great at filming like gritty, violent action. But the thing about Tarantino is that he's good at all of these things. And I think that what makes him stand out among all the directors that, like in theory, attempt to make a similar kind of movie. Uh, and I pretty much liked all of his work that I've seen. I gotta admit, there are a few movies of his I haven't seen. I have yet to see Reservoir Dogs, I have yet to see Jackie Brown, and I have probably yet to see Death Proof. Though I think that one didn't do as well as some of his other movies, so I might actually decide to skip that one. But never mind. Other than that, I really loved Pulp Fiction. I very much liked the Kill Bill movies. Admittedly, maybe not quite as much as some of his other stuff, but I still enjoyed them. And I also loved Inglorious Bastards. That one was really amazing. So, that being said, of course I was looking forward to seeing Django Unchained, especially since it's got really great reviews from like people who actually know what they're talking about. Um, because you know what I find kind of annoying, this movie took like almost a month, well, maybe not a month, but 3 weeks to come out here in Germany. I know that in the States its release was like Christmas Day. Here it came out, I think, 2 or 3 days ago. And I was like, why is that? It's a good movie. Actually, yeah, I think I may know why that is. It may be because Christopher Waltz synchronized his own dialogue in German, but whatever. So, what I was going to say, I think this one maybe. But what can I say? It's classic Tarantino, and I think it may be among his best. See, what it does is take that classic Italian Western aesthetic that is very much ingrained in like the consciousness of basically everyone who's interested in film. He takes the classic aesthetic of Italian Western movies and the elements that make it what it is, in that it strayed away from the more romanticized style that American Western movies had, and to touch upon something that probably only Germans know, German Western movies, you know, Karl May and such. You have no idea what I'm talking about, probably. That they strayed away from that more idealized, romanticized, and basically, I think the word is well, it's not actually a word, but the word I'm thinking of is pulp-like Western style that movies before the Italian Westerns had, and replaced it with a more gritty, a more violent, a more, I suppose you could say, more mature kind of style. And it takes that gritty Italian Western style to tackle a very controversial and very, again, very mature subject, that being the subject of slavery, to tell that kind of story. Because basically what it is a revenge story. It's about an slave who gets freed by a bounty hunter played by Christopher Waltz, whom those who have seen Inglourious Bastards played um, like that SS commander in Inglourious Bastards. Hans Landa. Which is kind of interesting because in Django Unchained, the role he plays there is basically the exact opposite of what he played in Bastards. But I'll get to that later. So it's about a slave who gets freed by a bounty hunter, learns the trade from him, and then uses his skills as a gunslinger to take revenge on the people who oppressed him, and on the people who still still oppress his wife, which is basically the driving point of the story. He's trying to save his wife from like that evil plantation owner. And it is a simple story, and I don't think it tries to be anything else. But this being the kind of movie it is, that's exactly what is to be expected. And what's interesting is what it does with that story. And what's really the defining point of it, in my opinion, it's the characters. And I think the characters work very well together in that movie. Now, the protagonist, Django, is played by Jamie Foxx, I think it's the first movie with him that I've seen, but I might be wrong about that, so please don't quote me on that. And while he is playing the more stoic, serious, and rather hardened kinda Western hero, what makes him interesting and what makes him as a character very entertaining is, at least for the first part of the movie, how he reacts of Christopher Waltz's characters, who, and this is something that needs to be addressed at this point, Christopher Waltz is the man. Like really. It's obvious that Tarantino has really started liking him, and I can exactly see why. That man is amazing. And now that I've seen him in another movie, in Django Unchained, only now I've seen what kind of range he has. I mean, when he played that like smug, calculating Nazi officer in Inglourious Bastards, I thought, okay, so he plays really convincing villains. But as I said, in Django Unchained, he basically plays the complete opposite kind of character. You see him in Bastards. What he played was the kinda pretending to be civilized, cultured face of like a savage regime, of like basically the cultured, calculating kind of brain that works for like a really barbaric ideology. While in Django Unchained, what he plays is the kind of character you'd expect to be violent, you'd expect to be like morally ambiguous. The bounty hunter who works for the government, who you expect to be a very cold and calculating kind of character, but plays him as a very humane, in a way, very, very kind-hearted, and I think that's at many points what he seems like that, a kindly older man who has taken an actual liking to his to Django, to the person he freed from slavery, and who has a like genuine affection, almost like a father-son relationship with him, and who's in a way the most moral character in the whole movie. And I think that really shows Waltz's range. And so therefore, I loved his performance. But it's far from the only great performance in that movie, don't get me wrong. It had a lot of pretty recognizable actors. It had Leonardo DiCaprio, who played a villain in there. Who played like the evil plantation owner. Who was, for a pretty big part of the movie, the main villain. And I found him... But I think first I want to address something else. The other really big villain, and this may count as a spoiler, but because it's really only established in like the second half of the movie. I don't think it's really much of a secret now. So the interesting thing about his characters is his chemistry between him and Samuel L. Jackson's character, who plays like, well, he's his slave, but in a way between him and DiCaprio's plantation owner. It's a very interesting relationship. I mean, I think the word I was thinking of when I thought about which word to use to describe Jackson's character would have been the butler, the personal butler of DiCaprio. But the interesting thing about them was that DiCaprio was playing a very dumb, a very uncivilized person, trying to play or pretending to be like a civilized, cultured man, while Samuel L. Jackson, his personal slave, who was obviously a very smart and a very very cunning person, was basically just playing or pretending to be DiCaprio's like dumb lap dog, and that they both still thought that that's like the natural intended order of things to be. And I think that made for very interesting villains. And I think this needs to be addressed for really, really hateable villains, because I think that's kind of a lost art. And I think it's probably a bad thing to be sad about. But what I like about movies like this, and like the whole genre of paying homage to old like B-movies, grindhouse movies, it's the lost art of writing really hateable, really despicable villains. And don't get me wrong, I kind of respect that most movies try to go for a more mature approach, for writing morally grey characters and for writing relatable antagonists. But then, I still have to admit, it's very cathartic to see when like a character who got introduced and you have really grown to hate over a movie, and you've really grown to despise. And it's really cathartic to see that kind of character, when you've been waiting like for a big part of the movie to see him like getting killed in some really violent fashion, to actually get killed in a really violent fashion, because that really gives the viewer a feeling of catharsis. And I will be the first to admit that it's probably really immature to think that way, and that's like a really cheap way to like relate to your audience as a filmmaker, but it feels so good. And I think it's kind of becoming a lost art. So many filmmakers seem to think that that's kind of beneath them to do that kind of thing. And you know what? In a way, I think that's kind of sad, because I think it still feels really good. So I really enjoyed seeing how those really despicable characters were introduced, and to see them get their upcoming, or their comeuppance. Confusing words, great. And I enjoyed that a lot. What else is there to say about it? I really love the music. I think Tarantino always had a very good way to use music in his movies. In really basically all of them. And I very much enjoyed how he mixed it up with like partly classic Ennio Morricone inspired classic Italian Western music, and mixed it up with like scenes that were set to gangster rap. And I thought, in a way, that was a really, I suppose, cute idea to set the music that has like become the outlet of like the urban black youth living in poverty, and set it to and or put it in a movie about slavery and about the struggle against it. I think in a way that was very, very fitting. So yeah, I really like the use of music in there. I think there are some people who are going to be maybe not angry, but who may be unhappy about the fact that the story itself is actually rather linear. But I think that that was very obviously the intention. I mean, it didn't have the same kind of... I mean, in many of his other movies, like in Inglourious Basterds, yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good example. Inglourious Basterds or even Pulp Fiction, they both were movies that had a lot of different plot threads and did have a lot of different viewpoint characters. That was actually, as far as I remember, a matter of criticism for some people, that the Inglourious Basterds didn't actually concentrate on the like on... I'm making myself look like an idiot. It didn't actually concentrate on the bastards themselves, but on lots of the side characters. Django Unchained is not really like that. It's really more about the character of Django himself. And okay, I gotta admit, for a big part of the movie, it felt really more like Christopher Waltz's character was the main character, and Django himself was more like the sidekick. Which I thought, again, they as well had a very interesting chemistry. In that Waltz's character was, in his own way, a really eccentric kind of character. Just for how strange it was to see what a kind-hearted person that apparent like cold-blooded bounty hunter is. And for like a big part of the movie, it felt very much like Fox's more stoic, more hardened and serious Django kind of played the straight man to Waltz's eccentric bounty hunter. But coming down to it, it is really the story of Django and of his struggle against oppression in the way he could do it, and his fight against the people oppressing him. And I kind of liked that it really only had that one blood thread, that kind of revenge blood thread going on, and didn't really try to linger on other things too much, on side stories. It is a movie with a very clear beginning, middle, and end. It begins with Django getting saved. It's the middle of like Django learning to be a gunslinger. And it ends with him taking revenge on the people who wronged him. That's what it is, and that's all it needs to be. And you know, that was like absolutely enough for me. I um I thought it was okay the way it was. Because Tarantino really finds his way to make a simple story interesting in the way that he writes it and in the way he directs it. And I mean, the writing, of course, was really good. I think Tarantino has a really great way to write dialogue that sounds natural. And I think it has been, or it has become like a cliche, a trope on its own, the kind of writing he does, the kind of dialogue he writes. Because Tarantino movies are known for people talking about things that seem very trivial, that seem very esoteric in a way. And that being the thing that makes the movies, I suppose in a way, realistic, makes them feel natural. It makes the people sound like people, in that they only not only talk about plot relevant things, and about things that are going to have some sort of payoff later on, even though in Django Unchained there was some pretty clever stuff. But that's beside the point. Not only talk about stuff that is in any way relevant to the story, but just talk about trivial, you might almost say random things. And that's what I always enjoy about his dialogue. Because dialogue also is usually very witty and very entertaining to listen to. I mean, I do know that Tarantino once in like an interview was asked, how do you write your dialogue? Or how do you come up with such great dialogue? Tarantino's answer was, well, I am a good writer. And what can I say about it? He's right. I mean, Tarantino is known as one of these filmmakers that have kind of a big ego. I, of course, don't know him personally, but well, if anyone deserves to have one, it's him. He is a genuinely good writer and a genuinely good director. And really, if he's proud of it, God, let him be. He definitely deserves it. But anyway, the way the movie was written was very intelligent and at some points really, really funny. There was that one scene about a bunch of minor villains who were basically like sort of the predecessors of like the Ku Klux Klan. And while I'm not going to spoil the scene, it was one of the most hilarious things I've ever seen. And it really had me laughing in my seat for that whole scene. It was pure genius. And it was absolutely one of the highlights of the movies, and it's really a testament of how funny a really well-written movie can be. So therefore, yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. But anyway, the way Django Unchained looked was of course very reminiscent of like classic westerns. And now I gotta admit, I never was too big of a western fan. I mean, there is some stuff I really enjoy. Though, once again, mostly the more out of the way stuff. Like, pains me to say that, you've most likely not heard of it, but you should totally check it out, El Topo. Or a Japanese western that shares a very similar name, or that shares the Django name, Sukiyaki Western Django. That, by the way, also has Tarantino in a supporting role. These are movies I like, but like the classic Italian Western, I don't have all that much experience with it. So therefore, I'm afraid that I couldn't appreciate that movie quite as much as some other people probably can. But even I, as someone who's more like an experienced person with this kind of thing, really enjoyed the amount of effort that went into making it look authentic. And actually not only making it look authentic, making it sound authentic, for the most part. And when there is something that seems like an anachronism, and there are quite a few of these, you can always tell that it's intentional. And I mean, of course the movie doesn't make like an effort to be historically correct, but that much should be absolutely obvious. I kind of remember that when Inglourious Basterds came out, a lot of people were complaining about the fact that in Inglourious Basterds, Hitler and basically the whole elite of the Nazi party were killed at the ending. And I was like, how can you complain about such a thing? I mean, it was absolutely clear that the movie never made any effort to be historically correct or anything. It made an effort to be cathartic, and that's what it was. And that's what Django Unchained is. So therefore, how can there be anything wrong about it? I mean, okay, in my personal opinion, any World War II movie where Hitler doesn't get shot at the ending is a wasted opportunity, but no, of course, I'm just kidding. But you know what I'm talking about. If you do such a thing, I don't think there's anything wrong about, like, betraying historical context to tell a story. Especially if you make it clear from the beginning that you don't have any intention of making something that's historically correct, but something that is supposed to entertain, something that is supposed to be fun to watch, and something that is supposed to be cathartic to watch. And I think that's something that Django Unchained provides a lot of, catharsis. Because again, I think it's a matter of characterization. And if you build up your characters in a way that really makes you root for the heroes, that really makes you hate the villains, and that then makes some really like brutal, violent scene, some like really violent shootouts, of which Django Unchained has quite a few, and then have these like over-the-top villains getting what's coming to them. In my opinion, it's really a thing of beauty on its own. And while I can see it's kind of frowned upon to like write morally unambiguous characters to have a very clear distinction between good and evil, I still think there's a reason we have these things in media. Because again, it provides a sort of catharsis, a sort of relief. I would almost say, it's a necessity from the standpoint of a storyteller to establish the villains as villains and the heroes as heroes. We had the concept of like good and evil characters from like ancient times on. So therefore, there's a reason why these tropes survived for so long. Because they're necessary to tell a engaging story. And while there is nothing wrong about moral ambiguity, and while I enjoy my movie that's only about, like, morally grey characters, and characters with flaws, and, like good characters with flaws, and evil characters with redeeming values and such, once in a while there's nothing wrong about a movie that has a really clear distinction, and it really plays off on it, especially if it's like an action movie like that one. But again, that's of course something to talk about another day. So what I was going to say, or all I'm going to say, Django Unchained, a definite recommendation for me, 2 thumbs up. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it. I hardly ever had that much fun watching a movie. Because it really comes together very well. The humor, the cinematography, the soundtrack, the characters, all these things make for a really good movie. And I think everyone who's the least bit interested in this kind of movie, and I mean, once again, I am not the biggest Western movie fanatic. But if you enjoy action movies, if you enjoy Tarantino movies, you should definitely see it. I'm actually kind of sad that I didn't get to see it earlier. But you know, such are release dates in Germany. Well, you know, thing is actually, I'm kind of sad that I saw a 2012 movie in 2013. So my like, oh, talking about it, there's something I kind of want to address just for the records. Last week I saw the movie The Life of Pi. I have no strong feelings about it one way or the other. That's the reason why I didn't make a video about it last week, because that's all I have to say about Life of Pi. I have no strong feelings about it one way or the other. But yeah, now after having seen it and Django Unchained, I can say that my movie year 2012 is now officially over. Let's see about 2013. Not sure if there are any movies I'm specifically looking forward to, but I'll let myself be surprised. Okay. And that's all I have to say about Django Unchained. Now, today, of course, there was another movie that came out, a documentary of sorts, that I want to address too, and probably will address as soon as I've seen it. Knowing the internet, it's probably on YouTube right now somewhere, so I'm going to watch it as soon as possible and give you my opinion on it. You probably know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I think with these words I can finish my personal review of Django Unchained. Again, definite recommendation. Very fun movie, very enjoyable, very funny, very cathartic. Go and watch it. Right now. So that being said, I'm your German snob. That's my opinion. Go and make your own. And I'll be seeing you again with my next video. Probably gonna be a Let's Play video. So, have a wonderful evening and goodbye.